Hello and welcome back to Botanical Living with Kim. I just want to take you along on a weekend journey with me. I'm starting out making up a few different batches of sourdough things. I'm doing 2 bowls that are just my basic sourdough recipe, basic sourdough artisan bread. And I can add that down in the comments, the basic recipe for it. I'm doing half batches in 2 of the bowls, and then in the large bowl I'm actually making a sourdough pizza crust bake-ahead recipe. One of the things I try to do now is group together several hours worth of preparation and homemaking things at the same time. When I have like a Saturday morning or even a Tuesday morning, sometimes that's the day that works out better to get a bunch of stuff done. And I wish I had been a better time manager when my kids were young and living at home. I've actually become a lot better at managing my time, but also adding in some slow down time for myself as I've gotten older. But this is kind of a little preview of how I do things. So I try to think ahead, what has to sit for how long, what can I do in between. And as you know, if you make sourdough, there is a portion of time after you're making that initial shaggy dough that your bread dough is going to rest for a good hour. So during that hour, I try to get some other things done. Making a sourdough pizza crust with the addition of some oil and yeast is new for me. My husband and I spent almost the entire month of June in Oregon, and it was wonderful. And one of the things my aunt there does is makes sourdough pizza rounds ahead of time. And I've always done discard pizza, which I love doing, but these are so great because you make them ahead of time, and this recipe will be down below as well. And if you have questions, of course, always ask me. But you make these ahead of time. My basic sourdough recipe with the addition of olive oil and yeast will make 4 nice size pizzas. Pizza large enough for my husband and I to split. So it's like a 12 to 14 inch round, 4 of them. And you kind of par bake them ahead of time, and then you let them cool and you freeze them. So they're ready. They don't even have to be defrosted to reheat up and add your toppings to. So it can create a very quick evening meal when you're a busy person and you've got lots of stuff going on. And that's what they look like. I mean, that was my finished one I did the other day, which was enough for my husband and I to eat and to have leftovers for him the next day. And I am all about that. So basically what you're doing is just taking your warm water that you would normally do for your regular recipe, your regular bread recipe, adding in the yeast, letting that dissolve a little bit, then adding all the other ingredients that you need to put in to make your dough, and then you're letting it sit for an hour covered just like normal. And that's really what I've done there. And I just use a damp rag to cover them with to keep them nice and moist. And I try to do cleanup as I go along. And that's, if there's a big recommendation I could pass along for making your homemaking a little easier, do your cleanup as you go along. Now I also started some seeds to sprout. This is like a blend of alfalfa and radish and broccoli seeds. And in like 5 days, you get wonderful sprouts. And sprouts are super healthy for you, and they're a great addition to salads, soups, sandwiches. So I had just been getting these started right here. And then you put them in a dark place. I'm going to cover these with a little towel because I don't have a spare cabinet to put them in. Now, if you've followed me in the past, you know I normally keep a very large volume of my sourdough starter. And I decided to scale it down to a smaller jar because I don't bake a whole lot in the summertime because it's hot here in Arizona. So into this smaller jar went Hildy, and I think she'll be just fine. I'll feed her occasionally. I am now taking off my rings before I start tackling my sourdough because I don't want to get those stuck in the crevices of my rings. So let's get started on mixing up this bread. As I mentioned, I'm making 2 bowls that have half of a recipe in it, and I'm doing my first set of stretch and folds. After you make up the dough, An hour later, you start on the stretch and folds, and basically you're loosening it from the side. Sometimes I wet my hands to do this, and you're lifting it up and you're flopping it over on yourself. And what you're doing is you're creating the gluten structure so that eventually the bread becomes light and airy. It's kind of something to do instead of the traditional way that you would knead the bread. So I set a timer for 30 minutes and I do 4 sets of those. Now this bowl has the pizza crust dough in it, and so it's set for an hour, and it's even fluffier already, and that's because it has some yeast in it and it's got the olive oil. And again, I'll put the recipe below. Be sure you like and subscribe so you get more information about this. But after I do this set of stretch and folds, I am just going to cover this again for about 30 to 45 minutes, and then I am going to put it on the pizza dough pans and separate it, and I'll show you that in just a little bit. But it's got to rest just a little bit longer. So as that's sitting there, I'm just gonna first of all take off this nail polish because it's hideous. Again, I'm just showing you things that I do on a typical day, and I try to incorporate things in between when I have the time. So after I get this going, I am gonna move on into my bedroom, get dressed for the day, make my bed. This is something that I think is really important. I think it sets a good tone for the day. For years, I did not do this, and now I feel weird if I don't make my bed. And I think it just helps with setting some order for yourself in the morning, and I just like doing it. And then I feel like it looks better, and if anybody has to come in and sit, then they're not sitting on the inside of my sheets, which really kind of grosses me out. So I make my bed always now. Another thing that I think is really important is skincare and a little bit of taking care of yourself. I like these dry brushing. Things are really soft, and it helps move the lymphatic drainage, whatever it's called, out of your face, and so you push it down, and I really like that. And then I always spray on a little refreshing water and moisturizer, and this is just something I've gotten in the habit of doing in my 50s, and I think it's really important to take the time, feel good about yourself, do that little bit of maintenance. Sometimes we get really busy and we don't take the time to give ourselves that little extra something, and we should. Okay, so my poor plants, they really needed to be watered. I soaked them in the bathtub. I don't do that all the time, but we had been out of town for 3 weeks, and yes, they did get some water, but they were still looking really peaked. Also because we didn't have our front windows open at all to let in natural sunlight while we were out of town. Plants don't like that. They like getting sunlight, so I gave them all a good soak in the bathtub and let them sit there and have the humidity. And now I'm just kind of rearranging them back where they go in the living room. And little things like fixing your throw pillows, folding up your blankets and your towels, just making it tidy. It helps make the day feel better. And while my stretch and fold during that time frame, the 30 minutes, I'm also getting a load of laundry started. And if you do everything throughout the morning while you're doing other stuff, then nothing feels overwhelming. And laundry does itself. It's going to take 30 or 40 minutes, and then I'll just move it through the dryer, and there's always little times. That way it doesn't build up and you don't ever feel overwhelmed. My laundry is out back, and I gave myself a chance to look at my backyard, and that snapped while we were out of town, so I've got to do some work out there. But right now I need like a mid-morning energy boost, so I am using one of these packets. This is an electrolyte and clean protein mix. It's a fruity, I think this one's a watermelon lime, and then I like to add fresh lime in with it too. It is so good. Now I'll go ahead and put the information down in the comments down below so you can see exactly what I'm using. But I find it's really hard to find things that don't have artificial sweeteners, and I don't do artificial sugars. So this needs to be a natural sweetener or nothing. I'd rather nothing. And like I said, I just add a whole lime squeezed in, and it gives it that tart kick that makes it so good. And I don't know where you are, but we are in Arizona, and so staying hydrated, keeping the electrolytes up, it'll make you feel better, it'll give you energy, and I feel strong. So while I have the time, I'm going to go ahead and take these out of the box and just put them in a container. I do like to organize things, and the less boxes that I have laying around, the better. I've been sampling different clear proteins, and so this is another variety. This one is more for like a dessert protein. This company has chocolate and peanut butter and vanilla protein, so I'm excited to give those a try as well when I make some healthy protein-rich snacks. And then I think that's going to be all of that. Another thing I really like to do is make homemade sauerkraut. And I do have an entire video devoted to making sauerkraut, so you can find that in my playlist. But today I just decided I was going to use 1 head of sauerkraut, or not lettuce, it's cabbage. 1 head of cabbage, make a small batch because I don't need a ton of it. And so this is just a really simple method. Once you take out the core, you are just going to slice your kraut or your cabbage as finely as you can. I love chopping, but you could use a mandolin if you're not comfortable cutting these really thin slivers yourself. I like to hand chop, and this recipe is super, super simple. Basically, you're going to weigh out your cabbage, and it calls for 3 tablespoons of salt for every 5 pounds of cabbage. Now, this head of cabbage, I weighed it ahead of time, was about a 3.5 pound head. So I'm just going to use about 2.25 tablespoons of salt. I accidentally, the last time I made it, I put way too much salt and it was crazy salty. And I think I like to err on the side of a little less salt. So once it's all shredded nicely, I'm going to set it aside for just a little bit. I'm going to add the salt to it, and then I'm going to let it sit for about 10 minutes covered. Now, I usually use pink Himalayan sea salt with most of the things I make. You can use whatever you like. And I'm just sort of massaging it in a little bit to make sure it's all coated, and I'm just going to set it aside for a little bit. Now, I am going to clean up with my counter. I use this eco-friendly, it's kind of a plant-based cleaning stuff, especially because I will a lot of times roll out food on this particular counter. So I just like to keep it all clean. Now I'm going to lightly spray one of my extra large cookie sheets with some nonstick cooking oil. I prefer to use avocado oil. And now I'm dusting my counter with some rice flour. And I'm going to take that sourdough pizza crust dough and I'm going to turn it out onto the counter here, spray a little bit of spray on my hands. We're using the flour because it'll slide nicely on the flour. Again, rice flour doesn't add more gluten to the dough. In fact, it won't incorporate to the dough. It's the same kind of flour I use when I'm making my sourdough. And I'm just going to divide this into 4 pieces. And you can see I'm sort of kneading it to make like a dough round. See, it came together really nicely. And I'm going to set that on that lightly greased cookie sheet until I'm ready to bake these pizza crusts. And again, I'm just going to par bake them because I want to pre-cook them. And then I'm going to let them cool and I'm going to freeze them so that I can just pull them out of the freezer if I'm running late or I need a quick meal to make. It won't take very long at all to whip up a pizza. And you can also use semolina flour if you prefer that instead of the rice flour. I just personally like using rice flour. So there they are, and I am just going to cover them with a slightly damp dish towel and let them sit for just a little bit. So I'm going to move them over to the oven, and while I'm doing that, I'm just going to do a little cleanup. I like to soak those crocks, and that way the sourdough stuff comes out of them pretty easily. So now here's the next step with the sauerkraut. You want to smash it. I have an old-fashioned modeler, and so I just use this, and basically what you're doing is you're going to reduce this in half. It's going to smush down to about half of the volume, and it's going to start creating some juice, and that is the natural brine that your sauerkraut is going to ferment in. For this small volume, that takes maybe 10 minutes. And then I prefer to use these Chinese fermenting jars. Use whatever you like to use. This is just my personal preference. I make a lot of fermented foods. I make kimchi, and I just really like these glass jars. I don't know where to tell you to look for them. I got them online, but this was like pre-COVID when I bought them, and I don't think the same trade is available now, but they work really, really well. And you make sure you keep that juice, any water. Sometimes you have to actually create an additional brine because you're going to want that cabbage to be under the water level in there. So the way these jars work, You just clean kind of the top, push it down. Again, I'm going to probably have to add a little brine once I let this sit for a little bit to see if any more liquid puffs out. And then you put the top on and you pour water over it, and it creates a seal. And I will move this over into my little area where I ferment things, and it'll sit over here for the next few days. And hopefully in this temperature, it should probably be 3 or 4 days until I sample it, and it'll be ready to go. So now we're going to make some of the sourdough pizzas. As you can see, I'm using an inverted pizza pan. I don't have a peel yet, but I'm going to get one. But you take one of the doughs and you're just going to sort of open it up. And these are really nice and fluffy. And I'm already preheating my oven to 425 degrees for this first bake. And once I get this all stretched out, like I said, I did lightly dust the top of that pizza, and it's inverted. Lightly dusted the top of it with rice flour. You can use semolina flour. You could even use like cornmeal if you prefer to have that under your pizza. But once you get it pushed out to the shape you like into the oven, it will go. And it's going to bake in here for about 12 minutes until it's just lightly golden, and then I'm going to take it out. If I have any bubbles, I will pop them lightly with a fork. And I'm just setting up a little cooling area over here because I am baking 4 of these pizzas and I want to have a spot to cool them in. I kind of feel like I'm doing dishes and putting away dishes constantly. So now it's lunchtime and I am just going to make myself a little healthy lunch. I have some leftover tuna salad that I made previously, and yes, I am weighing my food. I'm following a sort of eating regimen these days. So I'm going to add some tomatoes to it and salt and pepper, and just going to eat as I go along here. And this is good and healthy, high protein, lots of energy, and I really like it. If you have any comments or questions, just put them down below. And of course, like and subscribe to this, and let's continue on. Okay, see if they bubble up like that? That's the pizza crust, and I just pop it because you don't need those bubbles. And they're not completely baked, they're just sort of par baked. So they are going to go cool, and they'll be ready for baking another day. Now the dough is on its 4th and final stretch and fold, and that takes about 2 hours because I set my timer for every 30 minutes, and I do 4 sets of them. Then I do these coil folds, or I think that's what they're called. I don't really know. But it sort of makes the dough have a nice firm texture, and you know it's going to stay together and hold a dough shape now. So then I just cover them with cling wrap, and I set them aside, and I'm going to let them bulk ferment on the counter. This could take anywhere from 6 hours to 12 hours, just depending on the temperature in the house and how active they are. So this was later the evening, and it's bubbly and jiggly, and it's time to turn this out and create my actual breads with it. I'm gonna divide this one in half, and actually I ended up putting it all together. I didn't end up dividing it in half, but I started out with it like this. And then I changed my mind halfway through, and I remembered that I had only done a half recipe. So I was trying to figure out, okay, I need to put these 2 doughs back together to create one bread. All right, I'll make 2 sort of tubes and then try to like braid it and make like a twisty together bread. So this was my attempt at doing that. I hadn't done that before. But I wanted to make my breads in loaf pans because I wanted to be able to slice them more like a sandwich loaf instead of like a round traditional artisan sourdough bread. So with the second one, I decided, okay, you're not going to divide it, just roll it out in one. And I wanted to add some inclusions. We like to add different inclusions, but again, I wanted this to be like a slicing sandwich bread. So I just decided I was going to add some oats and some sunflower seeds, shelled sunflower seeds to it, because I thought, ooh, a nutty oat bread would be really tasty and healthy. So this is one of the easy ways to add inclusions, sort of roll it up. And they actually bake so great in a loaf pan. I decided to spray some non-stick cooking oil in there because I'm not using a banneton and I won't be turning it out. It's gonna be cooked in this loaf pan just like this. So now they go in the fridge to ferment overnight. So here we are the next day. I like using my roasting pan a lot for different sourdough bakings, but You have to create like a secondary oven within the oven when you use a loaf pan. So I use this little rack, add some water in the bottom because you want to create steam. And then I'm not really doing a big scoring on this bread. I am just going to cut a vent, because if you bake sourdough or any bread, you know that it needs to let steam escape or it will pop out somewhere. And I kind of want to put it where I want it to be. So this baked and it came out beautifully. In fact, this bread was absolutely delicious. So I'm just going to let it sit here and cool. They smell so good when they bake. It's hard to resist the urge to cut into them right away. But if you don't want gummy bread, you need to let them sit. I went ahead and baked the second bread while I was at it, and this one's plain, but they're just beautiful. And I decided to go ahead and pre-slice them. And I'm just going to put these in the freezer. That way I can take out a few slices at a time whenever we need them. And it's so much easier to pre-slice your bread. Just label it and then take it out and let it come to room temperature, or toast it or warm it up. You could pull out a set for a sandwich. You could pull out half a loaf. And I just think this is one of the best time-saving ways to make your sourdough bread and have it ready for future use. So this evening I decided, why not use one of those yummy pizza crusts that I had baked earlier and just make a pizza. We had thought out some ground beef and I didn't feel like doing anything else with it. So this is my method for making some yummy crumble toppings for the pizza. I love using bone broth in everything, and I didn't have any homemade right now. So I'm just seasoning my ground beef and I'm going to cook that down. And then meanwhile, I'm going to slice up a bunch of the different veggies that I'm going to use as toppings. Sometimes I'll saute vegetables ahead of time if I need to, if there's like if I did squash or something like that, I'd like to saute that ahead of time. But this one, I'm going to cut everything small enough that it should cook in the amount of time I need it on the pizza. Got some basil from the garden that's fresh from outside. Just roughly chop that up and give it some onions. I don't have a lot of extra things in my refrigerator right now, so this is just sort of a pizza with some basics that I have that I could throw together last minute. Now remember how I told you with all those pizza crusts I made, you can freeze them ahead of time? Well, this is what I'm doing. So once they're nice and cool, I'm just wrapping them in Reynolds wrap. I like to use the extra thick aluminum foil. It's the heavy duty. And I just get this at Costco. And I'm just going to be able to stack these, put these in my outside freezer. And on days when I need to throw something together quickly or I really don't feel like cooking, I could pull one of these out, make some toppings, and then just cook it in my oven at 500 degrees for about 10 minutes, and I will have a bubbly, delicious pizza made in a fraction of the time. So when you go to reheat up one of those crusts and you're going to make your pizza, dust that inverted pizza pan again with, I used rice flour, used semolina flour or something. Put your pizza crust on there and then start with your sauce. I like to have cans of this Rouse marinara sauce on hand. Yes, it's marinara, but it's delicious and it makes a wonderful pizza sauce. It's thicker and it's yummy. We sell it all over, but I tend to get the 2-pack at Costco because it is the most cost effective. Then I'm slicing up some of the Parmesan cheese. I also get that at Costco. I think it's delicious. And I'm also adding some feta. I don't use mozzarella cheese because I have like a pretty hefty lactose intolerance. So the super soft cheeses really bother my stomach. Feta does not, and Parmesan does not, because that's a pretty hard cheese. I'm just putting the onions. I have bell peppers on there. I have that ground beef that I made earlier, and this is the recipe. I can put this down below as well, but that is the actual pizza crust recipe if you're interested in making that at home. So once you get that grated on there, pop it in the oven for about 10 minutes at 500 degrees, and it is going to come out delicious and bubbly. Look at that, so yummy. And you know, it's just my husband and I here now. Our kids are adults. but hey, you still gotta cook even when you're in your 50s. So this is a pretty healthy meal for us. This is one of the higher carb meals, obviously, because it's got a sourdough crust base, but it's still, you can control what toppings you're putting on it and how much of everything. It's a lot healthier than buying a store-bought pizza, and if you make your pizza crust ahead of time, it doesn't take very much time at all. So as always, if you have any questions, let me know. If you like my content, please consider following, sharing, give it a thumbs up. And I hope you come back again, and I look forward to interacting with you. Have a wonderful day. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye. Time to go edit.